makes most women start a business? Is it passion, money, or freedom? Welcome to Female Founders, the podcast that takes you behind the scene with women who are founders and CEOs to help you start and scale a successful business of your own. I am your host, Nagelia de Ravin.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Female Founders. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Nicole Pulliam. Dr. Pulliam, founder of Real and Wealthy LLC, is dedicated to empowering women of color and first-generation professionals. With a rich background in academia and a passion for coaching, she helps clients overcome imposter syndromes and embrace their worth. Her work is deeply rooted in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Good morning, Dr. Pulliam. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so excited also to get to know a bit more about your company and all the great work you have been doing in New Jersey. So can you share your journey growing up in New Jersey to becoming the founder and CEO of your own company, which is very fascinating to see other women doing great work out there.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So my journey has been, I would say, a long, windy road in good ways. Because becoming an entrepreneur was never something that was at the forefront of my mind. Although now thinking back, I think I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit, mostly because I've always liked to do my own thing and have control over my time and the work that I produce and how I want to serve. Another theme that maybe we'll get to today as it relates to my entrepreneurial journey is I have always been the type of person who has liked to blaze new trails, to do something brand new where no one else in my immediately circle has done it.
You like to take chances.
Yes, in many ways, yes. I've just always had this spirit of I want more. I want to see what else I can achieve. So my journey to entrepreneurial, sort of being a founder and CEO of my own company has something that has been on my heart and in my spirit for the past, I would say, 3 to 4 years. I officially launched this year, however, and I'll share a little bit more about that. Although I had been doing other speaking engagements and trainings and lots of other things before I actually formed a company. So first it was just, all right, sure. And you invite me in.
Testing the water.
Testing the waters. And then, without even thinking about turning this into a business. But alongside my journey has been my journey as an educator and as a researcher. So full time, I am still a full-time professor. And I have been able to align everything that I teach, everything that I research to now the things that I do beyond the walls of a university setting, primarily because, like many of your previous guests, I've listened to some of the podcast episodes, just feeling called to serve in greater, more expansive ways that were really beyond the walls of academia for me. So, it's been this long, windy journey, but it's been a beautiful journey because I really am learning so much about myself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as a business owner, so much more than I anticipated. So I've sort of given birth to my company while also figuring out how to align it to all of my other passions that I'm able to do through my teaching and through my research.
As women, I think that we have a lot of passions, a lot of things we care about. And I understand the reason behind it, because at the end of the day, we give birth. A lot, even for some women that doesn't give birth, naturally, we fall in love with earth, though, because it's like a mother nature. It's kind of like we're creating for that. And it's hard to just have one habit as a woman. Very hard. If a woman say, I have one habit, that's when you really haven't thinking all the way through everything else. So I can understand well when you say that trying to put it all together to align with one another. But I think that also what you are doing also is helping others to find the same thing as well, because you say you do a lot of speaking, or you are out there, you are already putting yourself out there even if you didn't have a company yet. So you are already teaching others, helping others, finding the way through yourself. So also you say you're a professor. What do you teach in school?
So I teach, so my training and my background is in counseling. So I started off, I've been working in higher education settings, colleges and universities for over 20 years.
Wow.
That was also never a goal of mine. So I am a proud first generation college graduate, first in my immediate family to go to college, earn a degree, and all of those things. So let alone go on for a master's degree and then go on for a PhD. None of that was part of my plan. I had very limited dreams and goals growing up because all I saw around me, I grew up working class and my parents were just simply happy that I would graduate from high school and then maybe get a good job. And there was never talks about, college or starting a career, primarily because that wasn't their reality. So, most certainly I didn't even know what a master's degree was or a PhD, growing up. So I've worked in higher ed for over 20 years. For about 13 years, I was an administrator and an advisor and counselor, and then started my doctoral journey. And then somewhere in the middle of that, learned that I really loved teaching. I teach at the graduate level. So I teach and train master's level students. And then fell in love with research. I love storytelling and, sort of the depth of someone's stories that you can get. And I do that by way of research. So I teach in the School of Education, but I teach in a counseling program. So I teach and I train future school counselors, or formerly known as guidance counselors. And I also teach and train future college counselors and administrators. So that has been part of my journey, again, as an educator and as a scholar. And then all of my work has always been rooted in access and equity and helping historically oppressed groups like people of color, people from, lower income working class backgrounds, basically who I was growing up. I was able to then turn that into a career and help other students. And now my work has shifted, which I think is such a big part of my entrepreneurial journey now. So I still work with students, but my work that I now do with coaching women of color and coaching what I call first generation trailblazing women really came out of a need that I had, because I had reached a point in my career where on paper I had sort of check all of these accomplishments, and I'm a tenured professor now, and, all of these great things, but there was just something else sitting in my spirit that I wanted to be able to help other faculty, women of color, administrators, other women of color in general, who are primarily working in spaces that were not set up for them to succeed. So that has been part of my mission. And actually, another part of my mission is to disrupt this whole imposter syndrome narrative that holds so many of us back, especially as women and women of color. So I chose the name of my company, Real and Worthy, because we are real, we're not imposters, and we are worthy of thriving and earning, all of the things that we deserve. So it's like this sort of self-love project for myself and for other women of color and first-gen trailblazers.
So now what inspired you to establish Real and Wealthy LLC? So what was that moment that said, okay, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to just do it?
Whew, yeah, long journey, as I'm sure you and so many of your other listeners can relate to. Again, it really took me, especially last year. I think, of course, the pandemic really played a role in the way that I started to look at how I was serving. Again, I'm happy with my career. I love what I do. But I had this like calling, like, no, Nicole, you're meant to serve in greater ways, not in different ways, right? Because I went through this whole like, well, what is it? Do you want to leave academia? And it took me really just pausing and sitting and listening. You know, I'm very spiritual, and I believe in the power of listening to, you know, for me, you know, to God's word, and just, you know, but I have been so busy. And I also learned that I had been keeping myself busy to my own fault, because I was not able to really hear and listen to what is
your
it.
inner self.
That's right. So 2022 was a really pivotal moment for me, because it was nagging my spirit so much. And I said, Nicole, you owe it to yourself to really pause and think about what you want to do. But again, it was a new trail, right? So much of my journey has been being the first in my circle to do things. And that's exciting, but it's scary. And you have, you know, like, it's like, well, who else is doing the things that I want to do? This feels like I'm like all over the place, when in fact I wasn't. And so I dove in face forward to any podcasts, any books, anything, any woman, primarily for me, women of color who were entrepreneurs, who were also sort of starting, you know, what we call side hustles. Although I have a thing about calling it a side hustle, because it doesn't feel like a side, it's a whole business.
Yes, it is.
It's not. Some people say, "Oh, your little side hustle." No, it's not a little.
No, it's not. It's a lot of work.
Right. But 2022, it was just nagging me so much that I'm like, I have to do something. And I took a leap of faith. And in January of 2023, right after the new year, I said, you know what? So I researched how to form an LLC in the state of New Jersey. And again, I had been following some other women entrepreneurs, and I said, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to
go for it.
Just go for it. I'm like, it's only the application is 100 and something, but like,
the worst that can happen, you lost that, right?
Right. Well, but then before that, I'm like, well, what am I going to name it? Because to me, I've always been the type of person where if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm not just doing it, you know, in a halfway, I'm doing it. So I also wanted the name of my company to reflect at the core what I believe in. So that was a long journey. So then I formed my LLC, and then I said, well, now what? Like,
well, congratulations.
Right. Fireworks don't go off when you form your business. So then I'm like, so who knows about it? So then the next stage was, okay, so how am I going to launch? What do I need to launch? You know, in quotes, because I think for many of us, we don't even know what that means.
Yes.
And I decided for myself, I know this is not needed, but I did decide for myself that when I launched, I wanted a website, because to me, that was just a goal that I had. Yeah. So I worked on a website, and I worked with someone to help me put together a nice website. And I launched in March. I launched about a month and a half after I formed my LLC. And again, what does that mean to launch?
Well, do I just post it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram?
Well, you laugh, but that's, you know, and I had been working with coaches. That's also a part of my reasoning for getting into coaching. I completed my coaching certification so I formed my LLC in January. I completed my coaching certification in February. And then I launched in March. Like I said, when I do something, I'm like, let's do it.
You just go for it.
So I earned my coaching cert and I launched. But launching for me, and I worked with business coaches and 2 other incredible women of color coaches. And they all said, just launch. Just put yourself out there. I'm really active on LinkedIn. And they said, but know that fireworks will not go off. People won't, you know, automatically flock and like critique your website. No one's going to do that. You will have people that are really excited for you. And then you'll have people that are like, what is she doing? You know, like, I thought she was a professor and now she's a coach and now and I'm like, yeah, I'm all of that. But one of the things that you brought up, I think, is really critical for women entrepreneurs is that we put ourselves into boxes and think, well, this is who I am and this is what I do, right?
That's
so
it.
For me, it was, I'm a professor, I'm a researcher. That's what I do as that's what gives me my salary. And oftentimes we stop there. But many of us have all these other passions and being called to serve in other ways. And we don't do that because we're trying to use our full-time role as something, right, that like really has everything that we need. And that's just not the reality. We are dynamic.
A lot more than that. Like my list is very long. I love to cook. Check. Well, if I want really to cook food for people and sell it, probably I can do that if I'm broke. Check.
Yes.
I love to make oils. Like I make my own skin products. I don't sell it, but I make it. But if I'm broke, I probably could turn it to a business.
That's
check.
Right.
So it's a lot of things we know how to do. I love being around kids. Well, if I'm really broke, maybe I could just babysit. Check.
Right. I will say too, another big part of my journey has also been motherhood. I'm a mother of 2 young children, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, having to navigate and nurse a profession, moving into a full-time professor role at a predominantly white institution where there are not many other colleagues that look like me, nor students of color, and having to navigate those spaces, working my way through tenure and promotion, which if anyone that knows anything about that process, there's so many written rules, but so many unspoken rules, which is why the number of women of color who actually earn tenure and promotion are really low because of all the other things we have to navigate, while also, like I like to say, like I'm the CEO of everything in my house. My husband is also in higher ed. Yeah, he's an administrator in higher ed and he's an incredible man, but I am the default parent because I'm a professor and I have the flexibility and an entrepreneur. I become the default parent. In fact, in about an hour and a half, I have to run and pick my daughter up early because she has a dentist appointment, right? Like
those are the things we have to do. Yes,
that's right. And I'm passionate about helping other women figure out how to sort of take charge of their own careers while thriving, not just like living in this constant state of survival mode, and validating their experiences as women of color, as first-gen trailblazers. So, but motherhood and all these other things. In fact, being a mother taught me that if I could be a mother, I could do anything.
After I gave birth, I believe that too.
Yes.
After the 2 weeks in the hospital, I come out with that child in my hand and I'm like, okay. So where's the when I bought the car, there was a manual inside it. So where's the manual for the baby? So you had to learn it all. I remember, don't stop crying. You get frustrated. So what do I do? Do I call the doctor? Do I call 911? Who's going to tell me what to do? No one. So you get to figure it out every single little thing on your own. Not even your parents tell you.
Well, they try.
They try, but I don't think you would have listened. But in my case, I remember calling my mom and said, I am so sorry for everything I put you through in life.
I'm still doing that.
I'm living it now. It's like, whoa, this is difficult. But you're right. If you are a mother, you give birth. Even if you're not a mother, you have like little ones around you. If you are able to deal with kids, you can do almost anything else because that itself, it's a lot of work. Sometimes when my son was about 2 years old, I wanted him to talk, be able to have a real conversation with me. And unfortunately, he couldn't have done that. So when we went to the doctor office, I said to the doctor, there's the problem. He's not talking. And the doctor said, let me give you a little advice. Be happy with it right now because when he starts talking, he will never stop. And you will want him to stop by then. And you know what? The doctor was right.
Yeah.
When my son starts talking, he will not stop. It's like he wanted to tell me everything on earth. Yes. And he knows way more than I do for some reason. And he wanted me to know it all. And a lot of times he's asking me questions. I'm like, I don't know, sweetie, but I can search and tell you about it later. But mom, I want to know now. So if you're capable of dealing with all of that, the doctor's appointments, the issues in the school, this and that, you are capable of creating a lot more for yourself in this world. You don't need to be stuck to that job that's telling you that you need to choose your kids or you choose your job, which one you preferred. So you don't have to. You can make another choice like you do, like I've done. I did it, so you can too. But that brings me to another question. Now, let's talk a little bit more about your company, Real and Worthy. And I was going to ask you, what does it stand for until you explain it to me? So can you tell us what is it about and how do you use that to help women?
Yes. So yeah, the Real and Worthy, again, when I if I could show you my multiple notebooks of all of my notes, like last year when I was thinking of my company and thinking of a possible name, and I kept coming back to this whole, like, what is it really that bothers me the most about, what's keeping women and women of color, first gen trailblazers small? It still came back to this whole imposter syndrome piece. In fact, because I'm an educator and a researcher, about 5 years ago, I started to dig into all of the original literature on the imposter syndrome and the imposter phenomenon. Again, because I knew that I was feeling some things too. Part of my story too is, being a first gen college student, not knowing how to navigate spaces, and also becoming a full-time tenure track professor at a predominantly white institution. I then felt like an imposter again. So I dug into all of the original literature about 5 years ago. And I've been on this journey ever since to not teach women how to overcome imposter syndrome. It's almost like this, now it's become this pathologized, here's a checklist. Are these your symptoms? And if so, and that really bothers me. And I think I've probably been guilty of it too. So the name of my company, the Real piece is we're not imposters, right? We are real human beings who are worthy of all of the accomplishments that we've already earned, worthy of wanting and not just asking for more in our lives, but demanding more in our lives. We are worthy of all of the love and joy and everything, because I found in my work with, students, undergrad, graduate, and professional women, and in my own story, a lot of my decisions that I had not made early on, or the questions and the doubts, were related to my own self-worth. I didn't believe that I was worthy enough to dare to dream more, because in fact, I was happy with having more than my parents ever had. I have more now than my parents would have ever dreamed of, that their parents would have ever dreamed of. So, in my parents' eyes, they're like, well, you should be happy with what you have. Look at all you have. I'm a homeowner. My parents were never homeowners. I make a, decent salary, and as does my husband. Way, 3 to 4 times more than my parents ever made in their lifetime. So one might say, you should feel really lucky. You should feel really grateful for what you have. So I went through this whole but I want more.
What about if you can not just want more, but you can do more?
Right. And what if I don't want to just make a good salary. I want to build wealth for my family. But I didn't believe that I was worthy of even asking for that. And I find that so many women of color and first gens, we question ourselves and we can't get out of that. We're also operating in systems that tell us day in and day out that we are not worthy, or try to make us believe that we're not. So this whole imposter syndrome narrative led me to naming my company. So my coaching, my training, my public speaking, all centers around helping and supporting women of color. I do a lot of DEI, social justice training for organizations that is really made to support historically oppressed groups in general. So that's sort of a subset that I offer. But my coaching is really centered on supporting women of color and first gens. I do have one male client right now. He's in higher ed, and I always get the question, so do you work with men in your coaching? So I would say, so, you know, if it's a good fit, then yes, but my company is rooted in uplifting and supporting women of color and first gen trailblazers. So it's all different strands. The coaching piece was the brand new strand that I added this year after I completed my certification. Because I was like, wait a minute, I'm kind of already doing this. I'm trained as a counselor. So counseling and coaching are different, but I already had the skills. I wanted a certification to back that, to make me be able to decipher when I'm coaching, when I'm counseling. But the public speaking, the training, I was already doing all of that even before I formed my business.
But that brings me to a question for you, Nicole. When you're talking about the checklist, and when you're talking about, all right, here's a checklist, check them all and get rid of them, right? So now you don't help doing that. And I understand your point of view for someone I study psychology, and checklist usually doesn't really help because the problem still exists, by the way. You just check it, but doesn't mean it goes away. Yeah. So now how do you you're not doing a checklist. So how do you help them?
No, it is a holistic process, because usually, so first of all, checklists, we all love checklists because they feel like quick fixes. Mm-hmm. I did this, next, without really stopping to do the deep work. So most of the time in coaching and in therapy, you know, your client will come in saying, I'm struggling with this. I need your help with this. Great. Let's set some goals. What we find, and what I find, is whether it's a 6-session coaching agreement or a 12-session coaching agreement, is that we start with that presenting issue, but then all this other stuff comes out. Yes. So coaching really allows me to work alongside my clients to really bring out the answers and the things that are already in there, but they just need some guidance to help bring forth, or like those aha moments that you just need a neutral party to be able to do that. Coaching was so critical in my career, and I thought, I want to do this for other women, because especially within certain industries, like in education, coaching is not stressed. Mentorship is stressed. Go find a mentor. But mentoring is really different versus finding a coach that will. So my certification is in executive leadership coaching. I also coach a lot of women professors, right? So they're not in leadership roles as you would sort of deem leadership, but they're navigating their own spaces as they move through and navigate. So it's this coach that could really help you sort of manifest, you know, and find the answers that really were already there. Now, there are some strategies that I will share, because I think there are ways to smartly navigate spaces, whether that's in work or in life. So there is some strategy talk to that, but it is never a checklist of, okay, here are the things that you need to do, and then everything else will be taken care of, because our stories are so multi-layered, and sometimes things come out that clients, they didn't even realize was there, but there's power in like verbal communication, and then clients will say, wow, I didn't even, or they'll like start crying and they're like, I didn't even know I was sad about this, right? So, you know, I think the coaching piece is really critical, but, you know, again, that's a really different role than the other training and speaking engagements that I do. I love the coaching because it's the chance to connect with people and give them that one-on-one time that they need.
Do you ever have to switch hat? Meaning like you become the counselor instead of being a coach?
So it's a fine line. I can say that. So funny enough, when I was going through my coaching certification program, I said to the trainers, I said, I want you to help me and call me out when you feel like I'm moving into counselor therapist mode, because I want to be able to respect those boundaries. So I am always cognizant of okay, this is kind of feeling more like therapy. All of the time, every time I meet with a potential client, I also ask them if they are working with a therapist, especially depending on what they present to me. Because I think if you are working with a therapist and a coach, that's the perfect combination of the two. So I'm really mindful of, like, I know when something that a client is saying is turning into something just a little bit more deeply. And although I'm trained to work with that, that is beyond the scope of that coaching agreement. So I include language with the onboarding process that says, here are the differences between coaching and counseling. And here's what my role will be. Here's what my role will not be, so that they're clear. But it is a fine line. So I am always actively aware of, Nicole, you are not their therapist in this role. So that is up to me to make sure that I'm not working beyond the scope of that.
So now, what are some of the common misconception about imposter syndrome, and how do you address this in your coaching?
I love that question. So the biggest misconception and the way that the imposter syndrome is framed is that we're the problem, that we are the ones that are making these things up, or we're the problems, right? So the term syndrome in and of itself is problematic because it sounds very pathologized and rooted in sort of this medical diagnosis, right? And the syndrome is really putting the ownership on the person that is feeling that. I'll share a really quick, interesting story that also sort of led to my journey and the way that I frame this. So about 3 years ago, I had applied for a grant, and I used that grant to embark on a research project, qualitative, so collecting stories of, at that point, it was undergraduate students who were first-gen college students and identify as Black or Latinx. And I wanted to use this existing scale that measured the imposter phenomenon or syndrome. And in order to use that assessment, I had to reach out to the original women who created that and wrote the original books that I had already read 5 years ago. And I didn't know if they were still alive. That research was done in like the 80s, So eventually I got in touch with one of the women. Her name is Dr. Pauline Clance. She's a psychologist. And I told her about my study. I told her why I wanted to use her assessment. And she said two things. She said, great, I'm glad that you're studying students of color, because her original research was only focused on white women. Mm-hmm. That was number one. And number two, she said, do not call it a syndrome in your write-up of your research, because she never called it the imposter syndrome. She's like, I don't know who eventually, it was called the imposter phenomenon. They were trying to study what was happening with these high achieving women in the workplace. And somehow over the years, it turned into imposter syndrome. And she said, if you're going to use my scale and base it on my work, do not call it the syndrome, because I never called it that. She said, because it places the ownership and that blew my mind. That was a game changer for me. So since then, there's been not a lot, but some research that has come out to say, like, we're not the problems. The problems are we're working in systems, workplaces, we're learning in school systems, we're living in a society that tells women, and especially women of color, that we don't belong in those spaces. They, in fact, were not set up for women of color to succeed in the first place. So, and it's no wonder that we feel like imposters. Well, I work in a space where I can count on no more than 2 hands people who look like me. I grew up working class. I wasn't groomed to get a college degree and go on for a PhD. So yeah, of course I'm going to feel out of place, because I'm working and living in systems that weren't set up for me. So I'm on a mission, and I frame my coaching from the perspective of, this is not an individualized response or experience. It is the system that you are trying to sort of succeed within. So it's helping them navigate it, helping them sort of pick apart a lot of those feelings of invalidation and fraudulence and not belonging. Now, my training that I do for organizations is placing the ownership on them to say, how does your organization create policies and practices that support people of color so that they don't feel like they don't belong in the first place? It's not our problem to fix. It's your problem to fix.
But now go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to women of color and first generation professionals who feel like imposters in their workplace?
Yeah. The first, where I always start is I start with validation, because whether or not you agree with the imposter syndrome terminology, the fact of the matter is we still feel the things that we feel, right? That it's not just us, that there are tons of other women and women of color who are feeling the same exact things that they are feeling, right? So I always start with validation, like, absolutely, right? And it's okay to feel this way, because we also shame ourselves for feeling certain things. I can't believe I'm feeling this way. Ugh, I feel so this. So we place shame on feeling like we don't belong. We place shame on ourselves for feeling like we're not worthy. So I start with the validation piece of it. Then we sort of move into this like larger conversation of, well, let's kind of break down like what's really happening, you know, whether it's a work setting or whether it's other aspects of their lives. Like what is going on? What is leading you to feel these things in the first place, right? To sort of help them really pick apart those feelings from like real lived experiences. And then it sort of moves into, okay, so then how do we strategize? How do we create, you know, plans of action to help you fight against that? It is not a one and done thing, though. That's the other thing that I share.
It's a process.
It's a process. I will tell you, as someone who has been, you know, fully sort of engulfed in this research and doing the work, I still feel like an imposter many times. I mean, again, becoming an entrepreneur, I'm like, who am I? Like, I'm a brand new entrepreneur. Like, I don't know what to do. But I know what it is. For me, it's always, Nicole, who do you think you are? That's my imposter talk. That's what it says to me. Who do you think you are? You know, you're
of course, I'm Nicole.
That's right. Well, no, because it'll easily go, well, Nicole, who do you think you are? You're not this. You're not this. You're still that little girl I grew up in a city called Passaic, New Jersey, you know, working class. You're still all of these things. And it's like this, like, well, yeah, I'm that. And now I'm this, right? So it's this constant, like, checking of myself and that like nagging feeling. So I tell my client, like, that will probably never go away for you. Never. You have to recognize it for what it is, understand where it's coming from, embrace it, right? Like, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? Right? Like, okay, Nicole, you feel like an imposter when you say you're an entrepreneur. What is that about? And move through it. I also think there's power in sharing our stories. For me, like with other women of color, because we operate so much in silos. For those of us who are like strongly independent and fierce and all these other things, and I've been guilty of this, we feel like we could do it all on our own, that we don't need the support of anyone. And that's a lie. We need community.
Impossible.
That's impossible. So I'm excited to share. I'm actually working on a new coaching program specifically for faculty women of color in academia to help them throughout all of this. But a part of that coaching program is also creating this community of other faculty women of color. So it'll be a hybrid mix of one-on-one and an opportunity to come together to share space, because we don't do that enough. But we need community. We need other women. We need other women that look like us to like, and help us pick ourselves up when we're just going through it. Because we don't always feel, even those of us who are confident, we don't feel confident every day.
There's the time that you don't even want to get out of the bed.
Yes. But we do anyway. But sometimes we need people to say, like, I have my friends that I know I can call, and they're like, girl, get your butt up and do this and do that. And then I do it. But you gotta kind of like fake yourself into it a bit and know that we all feel this way.
Right.
LinkedIn is great for like seeing people's accomplishments, but what you don't see is all of the other things that are going on.
Well, the thing is that with LinkedIn is the fact that with social media in general, I should just use LinkedIn, is you're seeing all these people posting all these things. They drive in the biggest car. Their house is so beautiful. The kids is in the best school. This is going on. They're talking, I'm having dinner in that fancy restaurant. And you're sitting there like, well, I started my business 3 years ago. I still haven't reached that. How did they reach that in 6 months? Yeah. But you know what? One thing that I always want people to understand, a lot of it are just lies.
Yeah.
One big lies. They're not true. So someone can rent a house. Now you can rent a house for a day and you can do these things in that house. Right. You can actually go rent a car and ride it around town and return it right back and do these things.
Yep.
And the restaurant, it can be anything. Is that person maybe just the money they're supposed to pay for the rent, they just use it and go in a high fancy restaurant just to take pictures and put in social media. Yes. And people do all these things. And then when you see them, and then you're sitting there thinking like to yourself, I'm nothing. I didn't get anywhere. I've been working so hard. I got nowhere. And look at that person. And reality is not true. So I started Warmel, and I ended up, when I started Warmel, it was the same situation. I watched this woman, and then I remember I had a conference with a lot of women, and I watched them all, and they were like doing big stuff. And I'm like, gee, it's hard here. I can barely even make $1. How do they find all these things? And then when I actually, what I was doing is, and one day one of my teachers, because I was studying psychology, one of them, because that was a big problem for me, and I was talking to one of my teachers, he said, why don't we pick up the phone and call them? You know them. And I did. And when I started talking to them, and I realized that everything they are posting on social media, none of them are real. So that big house you see, it's not the big house. They were just there for a party that night, and they just take a bunch of pictures around the house, and they keep using it over the years. Yes. So, and I was like, one of them was going through a hard divorce and had to move to a 1-bedroom apartment, and she couldn't even pay that. And I was like, so much was going on in this woman's lives, but they were covering it up. Yes. So they look good in the outside, but the inside is in so much pain. And I was like, isn't it would be much better to spend the time in finding yourself than faking it?
Yes.
But again, people just do that just to show up. So I guess I was just trying to add on to what you say, Nicole. It's like, don't name yourself things through social media. Just because somebody said, I have a PhD, don't look at it that because you have just a bachelor degree, they are any better than you. It's not true. Just because I have an MBA doesn't mean that you don't know business more than I do. That's actually, right. For me, I look at it just a piece of paper. So really, my real study is done by growing my company. I learned through that. Like, that is the hardest study for me, really. It's the real thing. It's not a piece of paper. I'm writing a paper. That's not what it is. This is the real thing. If this doesn't work, I'm broke. So that's pretty much, don't feel bad. And I think I love what you're doing, the way you look at imposter syndrome. I can't say I didn't deal with that. I did. But one thing that's keeping me going is every day I get to wake up, I said, I love me. Whatever happened today, I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to continue to love me, and I'm going to do the best I can do.
That's right.
And I keep on moving forward. And for me, that's the best. It's kind of funny. You can see me in the street, like I'm in a grocery store. I just hug myself. I got this. I'm okay. And I let whatever that was going to bother me, I let it go.
That's right. Let go of the perfection. That's another, usually there's two things, people who say, quote unquote, suffer from imposter syndrome. It could either look like perfection or doing absolutely nothing because you're so stifled by, like not knowing what to do. So you do nothing. either one is detrimental to our success as women in general. But yeah, self-comparison, again, we all do it. We're all guilty of it, but it truly is the thief of joy. Self-comparison, because there's always going to be someone who has something else that you don't have. Always.
And it's okay. It's okay.
And it's okay.
Either it's real or it's fake, whatever it is, forget about it. I went through this and I had to figure it out on my own. Like all these people I was watching, I thought they were on the top of the world, and in reality, they were in the bottom of the world. Actually, I was in the top of them because I was doing way better than them. Yep. So I wasn't posting on social media because I'm not that type of person. Yes. But again, live your life. And I think that the best you can do for yourself, remember to let yourself know you love yourself.
Yes. Yes.
No matter what. And that's something I tell myself all the time. I love me. I'm sorry, but I do. I just love me.
I laugh at myself all the time. I'm like, Nicole, what did you like? There are just certain things I'm like, I just have to laugh at myself and then keep it moving.
Keep it moving.
Like we make mistakes, but it really, I know it sounds so cliche, but it really is. It's about the journey. There is no destination to this. If you are alive and still on the face of this earth, we still have work to do. And to me, we should always try to improve, whether that's in our personal lives, our professional lives, how we grow our businesses. Every day is a new opportunity to just do something a little bit differently. And it's trial and error. When I teach my classes, I've been teaching them for over 10 years, and I try something new and I'm like, well, that didn't go well. And other things, I'm like, oh, that worked really well. Like, that's it. That's it. Take a chance on it. No one, and if it quote unquote fails, like no one cares.
Actually, and even if you think other people care, you shouldn't care, because what you should really be doing is lay it down. I felt this. Why? Yeah. Try to figure it out why you fell and learn from it. And keep moving forward. And you know what? If you decide that you're going to stop, then you just fail yourself for real. The moment you said, I fail and I stop, and I'm just going to keep my job, every day I come, my boss screaming at me, and I'm just going to be happy and I feed the kids. Well, you just not just fail yourself, but you also just fail your entire family, because now your kids are watching you being miserable, and they're going to grow up thinking they need to be that miserable too, so they can provide for their family. So don't do that.
It's not a way to live. So yeah.
But now, what is the one message you want every first generation woman to remember?
I want every first generation trailblazer, and even if you're not first gen trailblazer, again, women of color in general who are trying to navigate difficult spaces. You know, my word of the year this year is audacity. Like, have the audacity to not just ask for, but to demand more. And more could be, more doesn't mean like just accumulating more things, more of the right things, more of the things that you value, that are in alignment with what you want, with your spirit. But have the audacity to demand those.
Can you give them an example?
Yes. I would say in your personal life, maybe, again, my world is I have 2 young children and I'm married. So having the audacity to share with your partner what you really need to feel supported, to feel loved, to feel right, and not just accept whatever is given to you, right? Having the audacity to clearly state, these are the things that I need. And if I don't get those things, ... Right?
Put it in writing. Do what I did. Put them in writing.
Yeah. I think as it relates to career, and this is aligned with sort of where I am in my career, having the audacity to really take a look at all of our skills, all of our abilities, all of our natural talents, to say, like, this is what I bring to the table. This is not linked to my job title. This is not linked to my company or my university name. This is me, right? This is what Nicole has to offer. well beyond the walls of your, if you're still working, but like really step into, again, I'm really big on the book Zone of Genius, like this whole idea of like really finding what you're great at and what you love, and giving yourself permission to step into that. Don't settle for things just because they feel good enough or they feel better than what other people in your life have. Just have the audacity to demand more because we're worthy of it.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, how can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. So I am very active on LinkedIn. You can just search for me, Nicole Pulliam, PhD. I'll come up there. I'm also on Instagram at Real and Worthy LLC. That's my company Instagram, and also at Nicole Pulliam, PhD. And you can find my webpage and all of my services at realandworthyllc.com.
Well, thank you so much for giving me that chance to talk to you, to get to know you a little bit more. And also, it was a pleasure to listen to the things that we don't want to listen to, because we like to put them aside, and we enjoy just taking those checklists very easily and take them home and check them out, and then we turn them and said, I did it. Did you really did it? No, maybe not. But for you to be able to take them to that journey, that it's not a checklist. It's actually, we're going to get it done.
Yes.
And when we are done, you're going to know how to deal with it. It's not going away. You're just going to learn how to deal with it because it's a part of your life. And you know what? In reality, that's the truth. And that's the part that you brought up today that I really enjoy talking about, because we like to just hide them, put them away like they don't exist. But in reality, they do. We've been suffering, and COVID didn't make it any easy for us either. So it's good to talk about it, and it's good to have someone like you you have our back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you for listening to Female Founders Podcast. That's it for this week's episode. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app or connect with us on womel.com so that you don't miss our next episode. See you next time. Bye for now.